if you're a teacher of history and your lessons on 20th century Europe are boycotted, heckled, or otherwise disrupted by well-organized, well-financed, and politically muscular groups of Holocaust deniers. Holocaust deniers really exist. They are vocal, superficially plausible, and practiced at seeming learned. They include at least one bishop of the Roman Catholic Church. Imagine that, as a feature of European history, you're continually faced with hostile demands to teach the controversy and to give equal time to the alternative theory that the Holocaust never happened, but was invented by a bunch of scientists. The situation facing many science teachers today is not unlike this. When they attempt to explain the central and guiding principle of biology, when they honestly place the living world in its historical context, which means evolution, when they explore and explain the very nature of life itself, they are pressurized and obstructed, harassed and bullied, even threatened with loss of their job. At very least, their time is wasted at every turn. They are likely to receive threatening letters from parents and have to endure the sarcastic expressions and tightly folded arms of brainwashed children. They're supplied with state-approved textbooks that have had the word evolution systematically removed, or altered to read change over time. We used to be tempted to laugh this kind of thing off as a peculiarly American phenomenon. But teachers in Britain and Europe now face the same problems, partly because of American influence, but more significantly because of the growing Islamic presence in the classroom. This of itself might not have presented a major problem, but it has been accompanied by an official commitment to multiculturalism and the terror of being thought racist. And as a result, it's become almost impossible for teachers to educate pupils in anything that contradicts Islamic dogma. The day before I wrote this lecture, the London Sunday Times reported that some Muslim biology students in England are boycotting lectures about evolution because they conflict with their creationist beliefs, and that even some trainee doctors on one of Britain's most prestigious medical courses are refusing to learn about evolution. This is a quote from the article. Inayat Bangawala, founder of Muslim for UK and formerly a senior figure at the Muslim Council of Britain, blamed the growth of creationist belief among Muslims partly on the campaign of Adnan for the name Khalil Yahya. Yahya began his work after studying the success of Christian creationists in America. He links Darwinism to Nazism, and his books include The Skull That Demolished Darwin, which proclaims the burial of Darwinism as Europe awakens. Speakers sent by Yahya regularly tour Britain, and earlier this year spoke in London, Manchester, Leeds, Dundee, and Glasgow. They spoke at University College London in 2008. Bumlawala said he has glossy books and videos which are heavily promoted by Islamic bookshops and on Islamic TV channels, where they are aired many hours a day. He added, "It is unfortunate that some Muslims do, when it comes to the opportunity to learn about evolution, boycott the lessons without even listening, or walk out of classes. This goes against the express words of the Quran, which are to read, open your mind, and use your critical faculties." Many Christian thinkers have learned to interpret the Bible in a way which does not in any way negate the teaching of science. It is important Muslim thinkers perform the same service. That's the end of the quote from Bumlawala. It is indeed true that senior Christian churchmen and theologians accept evolution and in many cases actively support scientists in this respect. The Archbishop of Canterbury, head of the Anglican Church, has no problem with evolution, nor does the Pope, although he does agonize a little over the precise point in evolutionary history that the soul is injected into the body. Nor do educated priests and professors of theology. Bishops and theologians who've taken the trouble to consider the evidence for evolution have given up the fight against it. They may think God started the process off, and perhaps continue from opinion polls shows that more than 40% of Americans deny that humans evolved from other animals and think that we, by implication all life, were created by God within the last 10,000 years. The figure for Turkey is even worse. The figure is not quite so high in Britain, but it is still worryingly high. It seems appropriate to use the name history deniers for those people who deny evolution. People who believe the world's age is measured in thousands of years rather than thousands of millions of years, and who believe humans walked with dinosaurs. Evolution is a fact. Beyond reasonable doubt, beyond serious doubt, beyond sane, informed, intelligent doubt, beyond doubt, evolution is a fact. The evidence for evolution is at least as strong as the evidence for the Holocaust, even aligned with the fact that we have eyewitnesses of the Holocaust. It is the plain proof that we are cousins of chimpanzees, slightly more distant cousins of monkeys, more distant cousins still of camels and donkeys, yet more distant cousins of bananas and cabbages. Continue the list as long as desired. That did have to be true. It is not self-evidently or intuitively true. And there was a time when most people, even educated people, thought it wasn't true. It didn't have to be true, but it is. We know this because there is a huge amount of evidence for it. Evolution is a fact. Obviously, the vast majority of evolutionary change is invisible to direct eyewitness observation. Most of it happened before we were born, and in any case it is usually too slow to be seen during an individual's lifetime. The same is true of the relentless pulling apart of Africa and South America, which occurs too slowly for us to notice. With evolution, as with continental drift, inference after the event is all that is available to us, for the obvious reason that we don't exist until after the event. But do not for 1 nanosecond underestimate the power of such inference. The slow drifting apart of South America and Africa is now an established fact in the ordinary language sense of fact. And so is our common ancestry with porcupines and pomegranates. We are like detectives who come on the scene after a crime has been committed. The murderer's actions have vanished into the past. The detective has no hope of witnessing the actual crime with his own eyes. In any case, numerous experiments have shown that it is not always safe to trust our own eyes. What the detective does have is traces that remain, and there's a great deal to trust there. There are footprints, fingerprints, and nowadays DNA fingerprints too, bloodstains, letters, diaries. The world is the way the world should be, with this and this history, but not that and that history, led up to the present. Creationists love the fossil record because they have been taught by each other to repeat over and over the mantra that it is full of gaps. Show me your intermediates. They imagine that these gaps are an embarrassment to evolutionists. Actually, we're lucky to have any fossils at all, let alone the massive number that we now do have to document evolutionary history. Large numbers which, by any standards, constitute beautiful intermediates. As I emphasized in my book, The Greatest Show on Earth, we don't need fossils in order to demonstrate that evolution is a fact. The evidence for evolution would be entirely secure, even if not a single corpse had ever fossilized. Evidence from the comparative study of modern species and their geographical distribution, for example. It's a bonus that we do actually have large numbers of fossils, and more are discovered every day. The fossil evidence for evolution in many major animal groups is wonderfully strong. Nevertheless, there are of course gaps, and creationists love them obsessively. But since the case for evolution is watertight without them, it is paradoxical to use gaps in the fossil record as though they were evidence against evolution. What would be evidence against evolution, very strong evidence of that, would be the discovery of even a single fossil in the wrong geological structure. As the biologist J.B.S. Haldane famously retorted when asked to name an observation that would disprove the theory of evolution, fossil rabbits evolution could so easily be disproved if just a single fossil turned up in the wrong date order. Evolution has passed this test with flying colours. Skeptics of evolution, in their case, should be diligently scrabbling around in the rocks, desperately trying to find anachronistic fossils. Maybe they'll find one. Want a bet? The biggest gap, the one creationists like best of all, is the one that preceded the so-called Cambrian explosion. Little more than 500 million years ago, in the Cambrian era, most of the great animal phyla suddenly appeared in the fossil record. Suddenly, in the sense that in rocks older than the Cambrian, no fossils of these animal groups are known. It obviously wasn't suddenly in the everyday sense of the word, since the period we're talking about is at least 20 million years. It is still quite sudden, and I wrote in The Blind Watchmaker that the Cambrian shows us a substantial example of major animal phyla already in an advanced state of evolution, the very first time they appear. It's as though they were just planted there, without any evolutionary history. Needless to say, this appearance of sudden planting has delighted creationists. That last sentence from The Blind Watchmaker shows that I was smart enough to realize that creationists would like it. I was not, back in 1986, smart enough to realize that they would gleefully quote my lines back at me in their own favor, deliberately omitting my careful words of explanation. Out of curiosity, I recently Googled. It is as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history, and obtained no fewer than 473 hits. As a crude control test of the hypothesis that the majority of these hits represent creationist quote markings, I tried Googling for comparison the clause that immediately follows the above quotation in The Blind Watchmaker. Evolutionists of all stripes believe, however, that this really does represent a very large gap in the fossil record. I obtained a grand total of 6 hits, compared to the 473 hits for the previous sentence. Creationists really are breathtaking. I've dealt with the Cambrian explosion at length, especially in my book, Unleashing the Rainbow. Here I'll just add one viewpoint, illustrated by the flatworm's tactical movements. This great phylum of worms, including the parasitic roots and tapeworms, which are great medical report. My favourites are the free-living turbinarian worms, in which there are more than 4,000 species. That's about as numerous as all the mammals put together. Some of these turbinarians are creatures of great beauty. They're common both in water and on land, and presumably have been common for a very long time. So you'd expect them to have left a rich fossil history. But unfortunately, there is none. Apart from a handful of ambiguous trace fossils, not a single fossil flatworm has ever been found. All the flatworms are already in an advanced state of evolution, the very first time they appear. It is as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history. But in this case, the very first time they appear is not the Cambrian, but today. You see what this means, or at least ought to mean for creationists. Creationists believe that flatworms were created in the same week as all other creatures. They have therefore had exactly the same time in which to fossilize as all other animals. During all the centuries when all those bony or shelly animals were depositing their fossils by the millions, the flatworms must have been living happily alongside them, but without even the slightest trace of their presence in the rocks. What then is so special about gaps in the fossil record, given that the past history of the flatworms is one big gap? Even though the flatworms, by the creationist own account, have existed for the same length of time. If the gap before the Cambrian explosion is used as evidence that most animals suddenly sprang into existence in the Cambrian, the example should be used to prove that the flatworms sprang into existence yesterday. But this contradicts the creationist belief that flatworms were created during the same week as everything else. They cannot have it both ways. This argument at a stroke completely and finally destroys the creationist case that the pre-Cambrian gap in the fossil record can be taken as evidence against evolution. Why, on the evolutionary view, are there so few fossils before the Cambrian era? presumably whatever factors apply to the flatworm throughout geological time to this day, those same factors apply to the rest of the animal kingdom before the Cambrian. Probably, most animals before the Cambrian were soft-bodied, like modern flatworms, probably rather small, like modern turbinarians, just not good fossil material. Then something happened 500 million years ago to allow the evolution of hard, mineralized skeletons, or otherwise to allow them to fossilize freely. The earlier name for gap in the fossil record was missing link. The phrase became fashionable in England in the 19th and 20th centuries. Its original meaning, a confused one as I shall show, implied that the Darwinian theory lacked a vital link between humans and other primates. History deniers to this day are very fond of saying, but you still haven't found the missing link. They often throw in a taunt about Piltdown Man for good measure. Nobody knows who perpetrated the Piltdown hoax. He has a lot to answer for. The fact that one of the first candidates for a man-made fossil to be discovered turned out to be a hoax provided an excuse for history deniers to ignore the very numerous fossils that are not hoaxes. And they still haven't stopped gloating about it. If only they would look at the facts, they'd soon discover that we now have a rich supply of intermediate fossils linking modern humans to the common ancestor that we share with chimpanzees. On the human side of the divide, that is. Interestingly, there are as yet almost no fossils linking that ancestor, which was neither chimpanzee nor human, to modern chimpanzees. Perhaps this is because chimpanzees live in forests, which don't provide good fossilizing conditions. If anything, it's chimpanzees, not humans, who today have a right to be saved. That then is one reason of missing link. It's the alleged gap between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom. The missing link, in that sense, is, to put it mildly, no longer missing. Another meaning concerns the alleged lack of so-called transitional forms between major groups like reptiles and birds, or fish and amphibians. Produce your intermediates! Evolutionists often respond to this challenge from history deniers by throwing them the bones of Archaeopteryx, the famous intermediate between reptiles and birds. This is a mistake. Archaeopteryx is not the answer to a challenge, because there is no challenge worth answering. To put up a single famous fossil, like Archaeopteryx, is to play by the creationist rules. In fact, for a large number of fossils, a good case can be made that every one of them is an intermediate between something and something else. The silliest of all the missing link challenges are of this kind. First, if people came from monkeys via frogs and fish, then why does the fossil record not contain a frog-heap? I've seen an Islamic creationist ask why there are no crocodiles. And second, I'll believe in evolution when I see a monkey give birth to a human baby. This last one makes the same mistake as all the others, plus the additional one of thinking that major evolutionary change happens overnight. Well, of course, monkeys are not descended from frogs. No sane evolutionist ever said they were, nor that ducks are descended from crocodiles or vice versa. Monkeys and frogs share an ancestor who certainly look nothing like a frog and nothing like a monkey. Maybe it looks a bit like a salamander, and we do indeed have salamander-like fossils dating from the right time. But that's not the point. Every one of the millions of species of animals shares an ancestor with every other one. If your understanding of evolution is so confused that you think we should expect to see a frog and a crocodile, you should also comment sarcastically about the absence of a dog-hippopotamus and an elephant. Indeed, why limit yourself to mammals? Why not an octopod? Intermediate populace of the letter. There's an infinite number of animal names you can string together in that way. Of course, hippopotamuses are not descended from dogs or vice versa. Chimpanzees are not descended from elephants or vice versa. And monkeys are not descended from frogs. No modern species is descended from any other modern species. We unbelievable. the Earth-like ancestor to a chimpanzee descendant. But it's not in any sense an elephant. If it were, it would also have to be a doggotee. Whatever is the common ancestor of a chimpanzee and an elephant is also the common ancestor of a dog and a manatee. The very idea of a doggotee, or an elephantee, or any other combination is deeply unevolutionary and ridiculous. An equally ludicrous example is to be found in the Muslim apologist Harry Yahya's enormous, lavishly produced, glossily illustrated, and childishly ignorant book, Atlas of Creation. This book obviously cost a fortune to produce, which makes it all the more astounding as it was distributed free to tens of thousands. Despite the enormous sums of money spent on this book, the errors of it have become legion. In the service of illustrating the false claim that most ancient fossils are indistinguishable from their modern counterparts, it shows a sea snake as an eel. In reality, they are so different that they are placed in different classes of vertebrates. It shows a starfish as a brittle star. In reality, different classes of echinoderms. A sabellid annelid worm as a crinoid sea lily. Echinoderm. This pair come not just from different phyla, but from different subkingdoms. They could hardly be more distant from each other if they tried, while still both being animals. A man-made fishing reel as a caddisfly. But in addition to these gems of comical bias, the book has a section on missing links. There's a picture of a fictitious animal, half fish and half starfish, which is seriously offered to illustrate the fact that there is no intermediate form between a fish and a starfish. It is very hard to believe that the author seriously thinks evolutionists would expect to find a transition between two such differing animals as a starfish and a fish. As for the creationist cry of, I'll believe in evolution when a monkey gives birth to a human baby, once again, humans are not descended from monkeys. We share a common ancestor with monkeys. As it happens, the common ancestor would have looked a lot more like a monkey than a human, and he would indeed probably have called it a monkey if we'd met him some 25 million years ago. But even though humans evolved from an ancestor that we could sensibly call a monkey, no animal gives birth to an instant new species, or at least not one as different from itself as a human is from a monkey. That isn't what evolution is about. Evolution is not only a gradual process as a matter of fact, it has to be gradual if it is to do any explanatory work. Huge leaps in a single generation, which is what a monkey giving birth to a human would be, are almost as unlikely as divine creation, and are ruled out for the same reason, too statistically improbable. It would be so nice if those who oppose evolution would take a tiny bit of trouble to learn the merest rudiments of what it is they are opposing. We're used to the idea that living creatures seem to be well designed. In some respects, the illusion is a good one. The vertebrate eye at its best, say the of a hawk or a human, is a superb precision instrument capable of feats of fine resolution to rival the best that Zeiss or Nikon can deliver. We know this only because, if it were not so, Zeiss and Nikon would be wasting their time producing high-resolution images for our eyes to look at. On the other hand, the great 19th century German scientist Hermann von Helmholtz said of the eye, if an optician tried to sell me an instrument this faulty, I would feel entirely justified in describing the shoddiness of his work in the harshest terms and sending his instrument back with a protest. One reason the eye seems better than Helmholtz judged it to be is that the brain does an amazing job cleaning the images up afterwards, like a sort of ultra-sophisticated automatic Photoshop. As far as optics are concerned, the human eye achieves its Zeiss-Nikon quality only in the fovea, the central part of the retina that we use for reading. When we scan the scene, we move the fovea over different parts, seeing each one in the utmost detail and precision, and the brain's Photoshop fools us into thinking we're seeing the whole scene with the same precision. The top quality Zeiss or Nikon lens really does show the whole scene with equal clarity. So, what the eye lacks in optics, the brain makes up for with its sophisticated image simulating software. But I haven't yet mentioned the most glaring example of imperfection in optics. Retina is back to front. Imagine that an engineer had presented Helmholtz with a large matrix of tiny photocells set up to capture images projected directly onto the surface of the matrix, which we can call the retina. That makes good sense, and obviously each photocell has a wire connecting it to a computing device of some kind, where images are put together. Makes sense again. Helmholtz wouldn't send it back. But now suppose I tell you that the photocells are pointing backwards, away from the scene being looked at. The wires connecting the photocells to the brain run all over the surface of the retina, so the light rays have to pass through a carpet of masked wires before they hit the photocells. That doesn't make sense. It gets even worse. One consequence of the photocells pointing backwards is that the wires that carry their data somehow have to pass through the retina and back to the brain. In the vertebrate eye, they achieve this by all converging on a particular hole in the retina, where they dive through it. This hole, filled with nerves, is called the blind spot, because it is blind, but spot is too flattering, for it's quite large, more like a blind patch, which again doesn't actually inconvenience as much because of the automatic Photoshop software in the brain. Once again, send it back. It's not just bad design, it's the design of a complete idiot. It isn't. If it were, the eye would be terrible at seeing, and it is not. It's actually very good. It's good because natural selection came along after the big original error of installing the retina backwards and tidied up countless little details, restoring it to a high-quality precision instrument. It reminds me of the saga of the Hubble Space Telescope. You remember that when it was launched in 1990, the Hubble was discovered to possess a major flaw. Owing to an undetected fault in the calibration apparatus when it was being ground and polished, the main mirror was slightly but seriously out of shape. The telescope was launched into orbit and then discovered to be defective. In a daring and resourceful move, astronauts were sent off to the telescope, and they succeeded in fitting it with what you might think of as spectacles. After that, the telescope worked very well, and further improvements were made during 3 more servicing missions. The point I'm making is that a major design flaw, a catastrophic blunder even, can be corrected by subsequent tinkering. And the ingenuity and intricacy of this tinkering can, under the right circumstances, perfectly compensate for the initial error. In evolution generally, major mutations, even if they cause improvements in generally the right direction, almost always require a lot of subsequent tinkering. A tidying up operation, by lots of small mutations that come along later and are favored by selection because they smooth out the rough edges left by the initial large mutation. This is why humans and hawks see so well, despite the blundering flaw in the initial design. This pattern of major design flaws compensated by subsequent tinkering is exactly what we should not expect if there really was a designer at work. You might expect unfortunate mistakes, as in the spherical error of the Hubble mirror, but we do not expect obvious stupidity, as in the retina being installed back to front. Blunders of this kind come not from poor design, but from history. One of my favorite examples is the recurrent laryngeal nerve. It is a branch from one of the cranial nerves, those nerves that lead directly from the brain rather than from the spinal cord. One of the cranial nerves, the vagus, has various branches, 2 of which go to the heart and 2 to the larynx, the voice box in that. On each side of the neck, one of the branches of the laryngeal nerve goes to the larynx, following a direct route such as the designer might have chosen. The other one goes to the larynx via an astonishing detail. It dives right down into the chest, loops around one of the main arteries leading the heart, and then heads back up the neck to its you think of it as design, the recurrent laryngeal nerve is a disgrace. Helen Poulter would have had even more cause to send it back with the eye. But, as with the eye, it makes perfect sense the moment you forget design and think history instead. Back when our ancestors were fish, the nerve that we now call the recurrent laryngeal took the most direct route to what was then its end organ, which was behind the very same artery which is now in the chest. During the evolution from mammals, however, the neck stretch, fish don't have necks. As the ancestors of mammals evolved further and further away from their fish ancestors, nerves and blood vessels found themselves cooled and stretched, puzzling the rectums, which distorted the spaces between them. And the recurrent laryngeal nerves became more than ordinarily exaggerated casualties of this distortion. In a person, the detour taken by the recurrent laryngeal represents a detour of several centimeters. But in a giraffe, goes well beyond the joke. A detour of perhaps 4.5 meters in a large adult giraffe. Many of us suffer from back pain, and the reason yet again lies in our evolutionary history. For hundreds of millions of years, our ancestors walked with the backbone held on horizontally. It doesn't take kindly to the sudden readjustment imposed by the last few million years. The point, once again, is that a real designer of an upright walking primate would have gone back to the drawing board and done the job properly, instead of starting with a quadruped antico. Another example of an ultra-date animal concerns the pouch of that lovely Australian marsupial, the koala, which, not a great idea in an animal that spends its time clinging to tree trunks, opens downwards instead of upwards as in a kangaroo. Once again, the reason is a legacy of history. Koalas are descended from a wombat-like ancestor. Wombats are champion diggers. The Australian science writer Robin Williams describes them as flinging great paws full of soil backwards like an excavator digging out a tunnel. Had this ancestor's pouch pointed forwards, its babies would have had eyes and teeth permanently filled with grit. So backwards it was, and when one day the creature moved up a tree, perhaps to exploit a fresh food source, the design came with it, too complicated to change. The end of the quote from Robin Williams. As with the recurrent laryngeal, it might theoretically be possible to change the embryology of the koala to turn its pouch the other way up. But, I'm guessing, the embryological upheaval that would accompany such a major change would leave the intermediates even worse off than the existing state of affairs. Evolution is an inescapable fact, and we should celebrate its astonishing power, simplicity, and beauty. Evolution is within us, around us, and between us, and its workings are embedded in the rocks of past ages. In this short lecture, I haven't even mentioned two of the most powerful kinds of evidence, the evidence from geographical distribution and the evidence from comparative genetics. To return to our metaphor of the detective piecing the crime together after the event, the evidence for evolution is far more convincing, far more incontrovertible than any eyewitness report that had ever been used in any court of law, in any century to establish guilt in any crime. Proof beyond reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt, that is the understatement of all time. And all time, as the geological evidence shows, is a very, very long time indeed. Thank you very much.
Arkadaşlar, soru yazılı olarak iletmek isteyenler varsa önümüzdeki birkaç dakika içinde toplayabiliriz ama çok fazla bekletemeyeceğiz.
sure that they do. I said that many Christian leaders do that, and they seem to have no problem with it. I actually do find a rather strong compatibility between evolution and religion, but many churchmen don't. In my view, the incompatibility lies in the fact that what evolution is explaining is the existence of complicated things like us. Now, any kind of God would have to be a very complicated thing, and therefore he would have to come into existence by some process. And since we've got a process in evolution to explain how complicated things come into existence, that's sort of totally unnecessary, undermining to postulate a complicated design on top of that. So I think it's at best superfluous, and at worst is positively contradictory.
Sonunu kısaca çevirmeye çalıştım, ben de baştan takip etmiyordum. Evrim bağlanan karmaşıklığı çok etkili bir şekilde açıklıyor, dolayısıyla alternatif bir açıklamaya gerek yok dedi. Eğer din evrimde bir sorun yoksa bunda bir sorun yok diye ekledi. Bir şey. Evet. Kusura bakmayın, bir dahaki sorularda daha dikkatli olacağız. Evet, Mahir Hoca'nın çevirisini tekrarlıyorum. Evrimle dinin çok az anlaşılabileceğini düşünmüyorum diye de ekliyorum. Anlaşabileceklerini düşünmüyorum. Yani anlaşmayacaklarını düşünüyorum demiş. Kusura bakmayın tekrar bu hatlar için.
So yes, there are very good examples in the laboratory of bacteria involving really quite sophisticated adaptations to different biochemical conditions. Of course, this is of great medical importance because in the few decades since antibiotics were invented, starting with penicillin, bacteria have very efficiently evolved resistance to each antibiotic that we can throw at them. This is a most dramatic and highly important demonstration of evolution by natural selection happening before our very eyes. There are other examples. There are examples with some deserts, for example, in Mediterranean islands, where we've seen evolution happen over a period of about 30 years. There's some suggestion that African elephants are evolving shorter and shorter tusks as natural selection from poachers, choosing the ones with the largest tusks, the ones with the largest tusks. So there are some examples where we can actually see evolution by natural selection in the laboratory, but mostly evolution of an interesting kind happened in the past, and we have to infer it indirectly by looking at the traces that remain, like the detecting most of them.
Elbette laboratuvarda da evrim gözlemlenebiliyor ama tabii bu asıl olarak nesiller arası sürenin kısa olduğu türlerde gözlemlenebiliyor. Örneğin bakteriler gibi bir nesilden diğer nesile geçişin dakikalarla ölçüldüğü. İnsan gibi nesiller arası sürenin 10 yılları bulduğu türlerde ise bunu gözlemlememiz çok daha zor. Ama bakteri ve kısa sürede çoğalan organizmalarda çok sayıda evrimsel deney yapıldı ve çeşitli biyokimyasal koşullara laboratuvarda nasıl uyum sağladıkları gözlendi. Bunun önemli tıbbi açıdan önem taşıyan örneklerinden bir tanesi de bakterilerin antibiyotiklere direnç geliştirmeleri. Bunun örneklerini de son yarım yüzyıldır sürekli görüyoruz. Tatbik edilen antibiyotiklerin neredeyse hepsine bakteriler direnç geliştirmeyi başardılar. Ayrıca bunun başka örnekleri de var. Örneğin Afrika fillerinde daha kısa fil dişlerinin evrilmekte olduğu, çünkü uzun fil dişlerinin bireyler arası mücadelede kendilerine zarar getirebildiği düşünülüyor. Dolayısıyla kısa fil dişlerinin kısalmasına yönelik bir evrimsel baskı olduğu görülüyor. Elbette ki en ilginç ve karmaşık evrimsel uyarlanımlar çok uzun zaman alıyor. Dolayısıyla bunları kendi yaşam bilimimiz içinde gözlemleyemiyoruz. Ama bunun örnekleri de var. Pardon, sorun orijinalini size aktarmadım. Soru şuydu, evrimsel değişimin çoğunu kendi yaşam süremiz içinde gözlemleyemeyeceğimizi söylemişti. Peki bunun örnekleri var mı? Sorunun kendisi.
Humans have had an enormous effect upon the natural processes of ecology and distribution of animals, and they certainly will be affecting future evolution. Enormous numbers of species are going extinct, and at the same time there are other species which are adapting by natural selection and by change of habit to exploit the existence of humans. And so there are examples, for example, of mosquitoes in the London underground system, underground railway, where the whole new, probably there will soon be a new species of mosquito has evolved in the London underground to take advantage of the new circumstances. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Humans are having an enormous and dramatic effect upon ecosystems, upon the species distribution, upon the conditions under which species live. And in future times, this period of human flourishing will be regarded as a great watershed, indeed a catastrophic watershed in evolutionary history.
Soru şuydu, insanlar doğal seçilme veya evrim doğasını farklı türleri yok ederek nasıl etkiliyorlar? Dawkins de şunu söyledi, bir defa hayvanların dağılımına insanların dünyayı kolonizasyonunun çok büyük etkisi olduğunu doğruladı. Ancak şunu da hatırlattı, birçok hayvanın soyu tükenirken birçok canlı ise öte yandan yeni koşullara uyarlanım sağlıyor. Buna örnek olarak da Londra metrosunda yeni koşullara uyarlanım sağlamış gözüken bir sivrisinek grubunu hatırlattı. Bunlar fiilen türleşmiş bile olabilirler bu metro koşulları altında. Sonuçta insanların şu anda çevreleri üzerine çok çok dramatik bir etkileri var ve bu ileride evrimsel bir katastrof olarak değerlendirilebilir. Daha fazla soru alamıyoruz arkadaşlar. Şu anda elimizdeki sorular bile çok yüksek bir sayıda. Bir soru daha çeviriyorum. Soru da şöyle, bilime yani evrime inanmak insanı Tanrı tanımazlığa götürür mü?
very unscientific view, since we've got a very good explanation for the existence of design, creativity, intelligence in the world. Why would we throw all that away when it comes to a God and say, oh, well, we don't need an explanation, or we just accept that God exists? What a cowardly way to approach answering a question. It might have been all right before we had Darwin, before we had a good theory of how design came into the world. Now we've got a good theory. Design came into the universe late in the universe's history. Design wasn't there to begin with. Design gradually evolved on this planet, maybe on many other planets. So I think that there is a strong logical contradiction between evolution and belief in any kind of God.
Kısaca aslında bir önceki soruya cevabın benzer olduğunu, bu sorunun da bir önceki soruya benzer olduğunu hatırlattı. Açık ki pek çok sayıda din adamı var. Evrim konusunda hiçbir sorunu olmayan, dolayısıyla arada çözülmez bir çelişki var illa denemez ama şu da bir gerçek. Dedi, sonuçta evrim kuramı karmaşık fenotipleri, aynı zamanda beyin, davranışlar gibi son derece karmaşık insan için önemli olgulara dair çok güzel bir açıklama sunuyor. Ve bu da ulu bir güç, metafizik bir gücün varlığına ihtiyaç bırakmıyor. Tasarım dedi, başta değildi. Tasarımın ancak zaman içinde evrildiğini ve kendimizle beraber geldiğini görüyoruz diye bir yorum yaptı. Eğer yine bir eksik bıraktıysam. Tamam, Wayne Hoca'nın şarkına güvenerek evrim Tanrı ile çelişmekte demiş. Sağ olun. Teknik sorunlar için de kusura bakmayın tekrar.